Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be focusing on the AI-ready blueprint. Our focus is on how to convert your data strategy into tangible business value. Over the next 45 to 60 minutes, we are going to discover the exact framework that industry leaders use to move from data chaos to AI-driven value creation. Our first agenda is on the foundation, which is defining the ROI of data readiness. Then the second agenda is the engine, where we'll focus on building the AI flywheel for sustainable growth. And our final part is on the untapped assets, where we focus on unlocking your unstructured data treasure trove. We are lucky to have the presence of two AI gurus as our speakers. That is 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝗵𝗏, the CEO, 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝗵𝗏, and our guest, 𝗕𝗪𝗵𝗁𝗏, who is one of our AI strategic mentors. Both speakers pre-recorded the webinar earlier today, and they are available during the Q&A session to address the burning questions at hand. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A part, and at the end of the recording, we will have them address the issues. Let's dive in and turn your data potential into business performance.
Hi everyone, this is 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝗵𝗏 here, along with 𝗬𝗪𝗵𝗁. We are bringing together our follow-up webinar from our previous webinar, which happened about a month ago or so, where we talked about what does AI enterprise strategy really means and what are the bottlenecks that the leadership faces today, these days in adopting AI in the enterprise. There were a few very interesting topics that we dived into. For example, there were 3 pillars we talked about and other things. But one thing that we have received a lot of questions about and follow-ups about is the AI data strategy. So we would like to dive deeper into that aspect. As has always been the case, I will be more in the Q&A session with 𝗬𝗪 and with 𝗬𝗪's insight into the data strategy world and the enterprise world. We will get deeper in the reality of what we're calling the AI-ready blueprint and how to convert your data strategy into tangible business value. So with that, 𝗬𝗪, would you like to have a few words?
Yeah, as always, happy to be here. As we talked in the past, rarely is this just about technology. Rarely is this about doing anything in a vacuum, but aligning all the key components, data governance, culture, always with the focus on delivering real results based off of real use cases that can be measured. So looking forward to digging a little deeper, and we'll continue to do this.
Perfect. Thank you, 𝗬𝗪. So yeah, let's get into the thick of things. And this webinar will be in 3 parts, basically, each digging into more and more deeper details about the data. The first one is the foundation and how do we basically define the ROI and what basically is data readiness. Then we'll be introducing the concept of AI flywheel, which is basically we're considering that as an engine. And lastly, we'll be talking more about how to consider your unstructured data as a treasure trove instead of a liability and trying to convert everything into structured data. How do we basically use the unstructured data to our own benefit? But I'll start with the foundation, which is basically defining ROI of data readiness. So 𝗬𝗪, basically, many organizations these days are struggling with the measurement of ROI from the data initiatives. Without trying to boil the ocean, I just want to dive into your practical way of approaching the ROI measurement.
Yeah, it's a interesting area, extremely important to get it done and understand it up front. Like most things we talked about last time, you do it in the context of what we call the thin slice, which is you identify your use case first. That represents the value add. And then you take this thin slice shifting left to instill the disciplines, governance, security. Part of that is your data disciplines. And you're basically just doing synthetic math where you're subtracting from your value the costs of these cross-functional efforts. Doing it in thin slices allows you to get an idea of what it takes early and often, and then you just continue to layer that on. So you iterate through thin slice upon thin slice upon thin slice, and each time you're assessing to see, are we getting positive ROI? Again, it has to be anchored in the end user functionality, which represents the value, the return, and then everything else is considered the investment.
Great. That's a great way to basically now dive deeper into the thin slice portion of it. And when we consider, an initiative like AI or data, we always think about it from an IT perspective and IT leaders looking into it. But how do the leaders, enterprise leaders, they frame ROI in a way which not only resonates with IT, but even beyond IT? Any inputs into that?
Sure. Financially, there's the term net present value, and that's been applied traditionally to any investments, mostly financial investments. But projects, AI projects, most technology projects are seen as investments when put together right, as opposed to pure expenses. So your net present value is you take the ongoing value that you expect through implementing these AI processes, whether that's revenue generation, it could be cost savings, it could be increase in efficiencies, and you subtract from it the ongoing costs, support and maintenance, and what is usually represented as a larger upfront investment. And the reason why you call it net present is so that you bring everything down back to current dollars. And then there's mathematical calculations, discounting that has to be applied, but it starts with having that mindset, right? So let's start with what the value would be. Again, it could be revenue, it could be cash flow creation. So you try to predict how that's going to increase over time, or how it's going to be applied over time, and you subtract from it what you think your cost will be. Now, when you're looking at AI, I see it in two different ways. You either have workflow or analytics. Analytics have a heavy data footprint, so you now have to then dig deeper into, well, what's the cost of establishing that data footprint and data governance? Workflows, sometimes when they're pipelines or orchestrations, or these days agentic AI, they still rely on data. So you have to not only calculate the cost of what you think getting those agents together, but what's the cost of that data footprint? When you add all that up, plus what you think it's going to be maintained, you subtract it from what your estimate is in the value gained over the lifetime of this project. And that's what you end up coming up with, what they call a net present value, which is the fundamental building block of return on investment, ROI.
Makes sense. And because now, basically, we are talking about thinking of a holistic approach towards understanding the total cost, direct, indirect, but thinking of the total cost in what it feels like in today's world. So that's presently what's really the value. If it was to completely be finished by today, then how much will it add the value as, right? And since it's not just an IT effort now, because now that's the residual benefit out of bringing everyone together, is that now everyone is involved: finance, risk, operations, and they're involved early, which basically now spreads the ownership, awareness, and comfort levels to everyone, which basically sets the right foundation for a successful project.
Oh, absolutely. And that, when you talk about calculating value in the future or in present, calculating the cost of investments in the future or in the present, you need perspectives from all those parties, right? Total cost is truly total. It goes across every aspect of the business. So having those parties involved, sharing those perspectives, sharing those concerns, sharing their approach to measuring either risk, cost, or value is the driving force behind getting to a more accurate or at least more favorable estimate of your ROI. And the byproduct is also it increases the comfort level because all those parties feel involved. They feel vested. As you said, they feel ownership in this. And that only helps, which then will increase the return on investment because you're going to have the participation happening throughout. It's going to be comprehensive. The group is going to assess and pivot when needed as a group collectively. That's all positive, which ends up increasing the return.
Yeah. And the most interesting fact, and if we have to sum it up, basically, AI can actually help measure ROI itself. And the implementation of any processes or system using AI or implementation of AI itself on data quality and predictive analytics helps leaders to understand their investment and the ROI in a more in a smarter manner, much more quicker manner. And that's where AI kind of is helping implement itself and building the case for itself. But this is a mindset shift where when we are actually utilizing a technology to determine what the technology's benefits would be. So that's a very interesting space now. That being said, I think we should move on to the concept of flywheel, AI flywheel, and what really we mean when we talk about AI flywheel is that there is a compounding momentum which is created when you develop the shared understanding using multiple different tools. For example, GPTs can connect technical details with business context. Then governance itself becomes an accelerator instead of becoming a constraint. As we had talked about the last time as well, it doesn't stop your system from moving, but instead it brings about a more contextualized understanding, along with it becoming a governance becoming more proactive, more scalable. So that kind of compounding interest on your investment becomes your AI flywheel, which basically keeps it moving forward. So the idea is now the past taboo, which has been attached to governance, now is actually fueling the growth and rather than slowing things down. Any inputs there, Louis?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we said, even in the prior discussion, this is about sustainable value. This isn't just about immediate value. And sustainable value comes through governance, disciplines, processes put in place for the right reasons at the right time. Your point on shared understanding, I think, is often overlooked and incredibly important. It is the first thing we should all try to achieve before we go out on an endeavor like this. Shared understanding across those parties we just talked about. How do we get that? We can use, as you said, tools like GPTs to wire up concepts and processes with represented data, if not the real data, in short order. That pushes the understanding across the team to the left earlier and often. Again, it raises that comfort level. So we're able to use AI as the initial steps to implement AI. That's where this compounding momentum, compounding interest comes about. And it, as you said, it really starts with get everybody understanding what it is we're doing. What's the value? What's the risks? What's the estimated costs? And you can use tools like GPTs to streamline that quickly in order to then determine, well, what's the right disciplines? What's the right governance? Are we still focusing on the right value? And you implement those disciplines and processes and governance to make that value sustainable. But yes, out of the gate, shared understanding, you're going to shackle yourself if you don't achieve that right away.
Totally. And just trying to draw this analogy, with what we had talked about last time, which was the virtuous cycle that we get into between demand and supply. And the key theme is that there's a compounding demand generated as you implement your systems. Now, how do you bring about this to light? So question being, how is Gen AI and BI becoming part of this virtuous cycle where demand for more data follows with the consumption of data? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's true, right?
Yeah, let's take a look at two important areas of a data strategy on the governance side. Data quality, as you mentioned. You can use AI to infer, proactively improve the data quality, which then makes the generative BI much more accurate, much more usable, which is then going to increase the demand because people using it are going to say, wow, I have a lot of confidence in that. Can I apply it to this domain? Another aspect of governance is the data catalog. How do you use AI to generate context that explains what the data represents in a consistent fashion? Again, improving the accuracy of the generative BI, improving the accuracy of any generative or AI machine learning you're going to do down the road, which then is going to create more demand for more data because you've proven the success of it. And it all started with, how do we get in front of the governance? How does that feed the generative BI, which then goes back and asks for more data and more, and the demand for that data increases. So it becomes that virtuous cycle of just continuously improving, continuously adding value. As you said, the compounding momentum of all this started when you introduced AI early on in order to improve the overall architecture.
Right, and the leadership is now also in this optimization or balancing act between security and cost management. Now, some of the approaches are available, I guess, to address these the hybrid approach. Now, the question is, what do you think are some of the approaches to ensure that leadership can keep growing without losing control? Because the security and cost management, they both go together.
Sure. Yeah, listen, we would love to use AI for everything.
Yeah.
Right? Or we would love to look to use AI for everything. You simply can't. It's not practical, it's not cost effective, and it probably won't be secure. Yeah. So like most things in life, it's a time and place. So there are hybrid architectures coming about where you use AI to infer what it is you need to be doing. It could be generating code. It could be generating insights on diagnostics that you are providing it. You then turn the results of those diagnostics and the code produced, and you run it on-premise or in your local cloud instance. There you're capping out the consumption costs to only the compute and storage costs that are running on-premise. You don't worry about exponential tokenization getting out of hand. And because you've already secured and hardened your cloud presence, you're taking care of the security aspect. So you use AI to generate aspects of it. Again, it could be insights, it could be context, it could be code, and then you apply and run those in the areas that you feel are most advantageous from a cost and security benefit. So you end up with that hybrid approach where you're still leveraging your secure and cost-effective cloud presence with the advancements of AI.
Yeah. So with that, let's now move over to the untapped asset in organizations that we talk about, which is the third part to this webinar, the data treasure trove, which basically is our unstructured data, that has always been a challenge for organizations from time immemorial. It's been always been considered as the bane of the whole for the whole data management exercise. So what are the various strategies you think, or the best way to unlock the value from various unstructured data, like let's say contracts, PDFs, emails, and so on and so forth?
Excellent question. So it comes down to really one word: context.
Yeah.
When you look at structured data, that context is implied. It's inherent in the structure. You have a table name. That name means something. It has context. Within that table are a bunch of columns. Those columns are in the context of the table, obviously. And each name and each value is in the context. So it's implied. We never had to think about it beyond engineering it up front. But historically, we've had this vast amount of unstructured data that we couldn't make sense of it to scale. We can make sense of it reading. Some traditional NLP processes worked extremely well, but they in and of themselves had a large learning curve, a large runway in order to get the value. With AI now, you're able to inject the context of those documents to scale. Once you do that, you're able to see unstructured data and structured data on the same plane. You can, if you identify something within an unstructured document that is a domain object that relates to something that's in a structured document, that's your link. Now you can look at things like P&L and revenue, trade counts against things that are in contracts, like you said, like investment management agreements that have covenants that say an investment manager can only invest so much into a certain domain, whether it's an industry or a segment or a company. That's in the document itself. Once you contextualize what those terms mean, you apply it to your structured data. Now you have this full 360 view of all your activity. That has been the holy grail, for lack of a better term, for years in risk, in revenue, and in legal. And now we're here. Right.
And one client project, it basically comes to our mind where this client was very, very far-sighted, because what he did is he thought about all the unstructured data that comes in the specific domain that he is in, and using AI, through basically we built a system for them where we used AI to collect all this unstructured data and produced and output CSVs basically from that unstructured data. Now, in absence of AI, this was being done by individuals, and individuals going through various documents, emails, PDFs, invoices, putting the data together into a template format. Using AI, that data structure or unstructured data became structured data, obviously with all the nice design principles we had to put in place. And basically, that unstructured data became the whole foundation of this amazing system. So that principle can be applied, I guess, depending on the domains and the knowledge that you can impart to AI to make sense of the unstructured data and produce something that's meaningful. That being said, so unlocking of this unstructured data, what are the options that we have as our organizations have, such as preparing the data, structuring the data either upfront versus just-in-time querying? So what's the right mix there?
Well, yeah, what you explained is more on the upfront what I call pipelining the data, right? So you're taking unstructured data and you're within a pipeline or orchestration, you're pre-structuring it for subsequent querying. That's extremely relevant, and it's going to continue to be relevant. There are times when you want to do that overnight, or you want to do it as it's coming in, because you don't know what the users are going to ask, and you have the time to structure it so you get it ready. Alternative, like you said, if you do it at query time, then you're looking at concepts like RAG, retrieval augmented generative architectures, where they use the brain of the LLM and supplement it with the data. You know, when you break down what an LLM is, very simply, it's a brain intelligence and it's the data that it used to gain that intelligence. Sometimes you use both, but sometimes you just want to use the brain that can contextualize the data at runtime. That's what they call RAG. That's an extremely important piece. There's other concepts coming out, MCP within text-to-SQL, there's TAG, but the principle is, how do you leverage the LLM intelligence with query inference data at query time and inference time?
Yeah, so those two methodologies, pipeline and generative, are kind of similar in fashion, but they're still different approaches. How do organizations make a decision which approach to go for? Is it use case based, or are there specific advantages in certain cases? What's the right way to pick and choose there?
It's always use case based. It's always a level of practicality and pragmatism. Like I said, if you're getting a lot of data overnight and you have the time and the resources to process it and structure it, if it's going to be used through multiple mediums, sometimes it's better to invest in that structuring upfront. Other times, if the data is just coming in almost near real time, or you have petabytes of files and emails that it's just not practical to structure everything in the hope that you're going to guess what the person's going to ask. You set up the inference time generative aspect through an architecture like RAG.
Yeah. Okay. That kind of gives a blueprint of making the choice. And what safeguards are essential to ensure that this unstructured data does not create further headache or create new risks?
Well, first and foremost, it's accessibility, entitlements, what they call role-based access controls. When things are structured, again, the context is there. You simply apply your rules that apply to the roles that people are in to that structured data. But what do you do when you have it at inference? When you have an LLM applying its intelligence to contextualize what's out there to bring data back. How do you know that data should be seen by that person, that person has the right entitlements? There are two aspects, levels of at what point in time do you apply it? You can do it at the file level. So you have the person's role when they ask the question, and you have the rules applied to specific files so that that question cannot be asked on certain files because that person doesn't have access to those files. The more advanced settings are, what if those files have multiple aspects of data that person has entitlements to? Not all of it, but some of it. Well, you build advanced role-based access where, depending on the data coming out, you're able to infer what it means, again, contextualization, and you look up your rules to see, does this person have access to this type of data, a legal entity, a client, a certain security portfolio. Those are the things you can apply rules on, and you use the LLM to contextualize what's in the document to then apply the rules. There's, benefits and costs, performance, maintenance. Again, it goes back to it's use case driven, but at least we have options now that we didn't have in the past.
Makes sense. So that actually brings us to a wrap. And before we close out, what are the takeaways in terms of the pitfalls that can derail enterprise AI readiness, considering not just data, but overall the approach that an organization may take?
Yeah, and I think the things you do in AI and data are overlap a lot. And we're gonna reinforce what we talked about last time because it is so important. Don't try to boil the ocean. Take thin slice, small, manageable chunks. When you're gonna fail, and we do fail fast, fail forward. Make sure it happens early on. Bring the multiple perspectives together, completely blow up any silos, shift right, make sure you're bringing in the business stakeholders, those that are responsible for delivering the value and those that are responsible for the disciplines that apply. Don't wait after the fact. That's just going to slow you down. Use governance as an accelerator, not a obstacle. Don't make it heavy-handed. At the same point, as we talked about last time, don't let the front office run unwieldy without the disciplines, because yes, the value may be seen initially, but it won't be sustainable. So like everything, align your data, align your process and user experiences all from day one, and you're going to be okay. Yeah,
basically use your experience, common sense, don't be over ambitious, go into it together, involve the right business stakeholders instead of bringing it as a surprise at a later time. So basically those principles that make any project successful. So Louis, thank you for breaking this down, for what it really means for enterprises or organizations to be AI ready. We covered ROI definition, the concept of AI flywheel, and how do you unlock the unstructured data, the concepts there, the principles there. And overall, it's not just the tech, it's about how you want to execute, align, synthesize the whole project or whole initiative into those thin slice, bite-sized chunks. And for everyone here, think about how you would like to thin slice your specific objectives in your organization, and what's the one use case that'll bring the maximum impact in your organizations, basically the low-hanging fruits, where data modernization could bring measurable results today. Bring it up to your managers, bring it up to your leaders, and that's the starting point. With that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you have been able to take some takeaways from this webinar. And thank you, Louis, for your presence. And thank you, everyone, for joining. What we'll get into now is some Q&As, which we are always open to answer offline. But since we are all here, I just wanted to give an opportunity to anyone who may have some questions that they would like to get answered now. And for that, I will like to ask Kelvin if there have been any questions that have been received in the background while the webinar was going on.
That was quite a good session. And yes, Mr. Jot, we have received several questions. The first question is, how do you establish a big picture estimate for management prior to the thin slice approach? The other question is, what other ways can AI be used early in the engineering effort of the data strategy? That question
Louis, do you want to take that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. The big picture estimate is important, right? Thin slice is an execution approach, right? But management really needs to understand order of magnitude on what this project could be. So, in the past, we've used T-shirt sizes breaking up into larger units of costs just to get an idea of, does management have the wherewithal for this project? That's extremely important. But on top of that, what's also important is high-level sequencing of what where the efforts are going to be, so management understands the direction that this is going in, that there's been significant thought put into what this will look like to the best of our knowledge before we move forward. The identification of where are the points of risk, where are the points of rewards. Again, thinking about all of this is very healthy, not just for management, but for the various teams involved as well. Another important part is understanding milestones, emphasizing value delivery. And what I mean by that is you try your best during every effort to associate it with some business value. It's not always achievable, but you should always try, even if it's 4, 5, 6 degrees away. By doing that, you understand, okay, if we had to shift, right? Let's just say management no longer wants to do the project. At least you could have something to walk away from with, I should say, that will deliver value. It's managing opportunity costs. Sometimes there's an opportunity that's better suited for the firm than what you're currently working on. And ideally, you want to end that, or at least cut it off at a seam where there is value delivery. But it starts with having that big picture cost and t-shirt sizes to manage the wherewithal and appetite of management, but then also providing them context and insight on how this is going to be implemented. Where are there going to be delivery points where there will be value that could potentially cut off the project and you still have value moving forward? And then you always want to talk about the risks up front. The second question on AI being used early in the engineering of a data strategy. A good example would be in data pipelines, right? There are aspects of data pipelines orchestration that have asynchronous and synchronous aspects to them. They call them DAG, direct acyclic acyclic graphs. Sorry, I can't pronounce that. Which basically say sometimes you going to do things in parallel and then come back and go back into sequence. You can use AI to analyze the data structures. It doesn't have to be the data itself, the metadata of the data itself, to understand when can we do things in parallel? When are there dependencies? Can we thread out some of those dependencies that aren't dependent on each other, but are dependent on the, let's call it the child table or the parent table? There are times when you have to determine, can you thread out a large data set? So there's a difference in parallelization of, let's say, dimensions that relate to a fact table. And then there's a parallelization of the processing of the fact table itself. And you could use AI to determine that. That will wire up an initial pipeline for you that you then again go back, review, and you tweak. That's a very healthy way. It's a very thoughtful way of getting things going so that you can move things along to see how well it's working.
Thank you, Louis. Kelvin, is there any other question?
Yes. The final question is, what are the ways to accelerate the understanding of incorporating unstructured documents into the existing structured ecosystem?
So Hajo spoke about this. It's the use of GPTs. And in that previously, we also talked about the use of synthetic data. So you could use synthetic data to represent what your documents are. You just describe it, what domain it is, what type of objects there are. You ask it to provide different alternative structures for certain types within a certain domain, and it produces a vast amount of data for you. You then turn that around and you can feed it back to the GPT with a input-output structure. It's kind of like pseudo fine-tuning, but it's not true fine-tuning because there are real aspects to that. But it's a way of structuring the input and output based off of that synthetic data so that the GPT will understand this term. When someone asks about this term, this is the value that you should find in the document. And you can do 10 examples, 15, 50 examples, 100 examples because of the access to synthetic data that you have at AI. And then when the time comes, if you want to use real data, I wouldn't use ChatGPT's custom GPTs. I would build it internally with the same concepts, a Streamlit UI with an OpenAI API LLM. And it already has the input-output examples in it. You just produce it real data, and it will associate the right data elements to the right values. That's a quick way of showing management and showing the stakeholders how well this could work. And it will probably stimulate some thoughts with those parties to say, oh, can we do this? And that, again, goes back to the shared understanding, goes back to understanding the art of the possible, really pushing the envelope and changing the mindset of not only your engineering team, but your entire organization.
All right. Kelvin, any other questions?
From the chat box, that's the only questions we had. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Kelvin. So I think, Louis, this is been very insightful. I think we will be continuing the series in the next couple of weeks. We will be coming up with more topics on to continue our discussions on how do we make it a full-blown 360-degree data strategy. So that's going to be another exciting episode. In the next 2 weeks, I'm hoping we will be able to get something together. I think that's all for today. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Louis. And we'll catch up again.
Thank you all.